So hi everyone, now let's understand about for loop in Python. And before going ahead with the loop, let's see how does Python executes its line when there is a no loop or no function in a normal way. So if you look at our execution happens from top to bottom. So do you see when we executed first line, it printed out this statement. So whatever the instructions will give in these lines, so those lines will be executed from top to bottom. So that's how Python normally executes different lines of code. So now let's see what happens when we execute a for loop. So let's see its execution. Do you see when we have executed our first line? So this is a iterable. So in for loop could run on any iterator and or any iterable. So what is a iterator and what is a iterable we will understand later on. But for now, for your bit of your clarity that what is a iterable we have seen in the past videos also. So any sequence like list, tuple, strings will be the iterable. Sets are also iterable. So, and there are many objects which are iterator or iterable. So any container kind of a object will be a iterable. So we can run a for loop on those objects. So right now I'm using a list. Do you see the moment I have executed a first line, this I variable, if you look at it in the memory, is referring to 1, and this one is the first item of the iterable on which we are running of our for loop. Now let's execute our second line, and now let's execute our third line. So do you see the moment our third line has executed because that was the last line in our loop, we went back to our first line, and now let's execute the second loop. And you see the moment we have executed our this line in the second instance of our loop, our this I variable has changed now to the second item. Now let's execute this. Now we have executed this instruction, and now we have again went back, and now when I'll execute this the third time in the loop, now this I is referring now to the value 3. That's the third item, and again it went back. So that's how in a loop we run the same lines of code again and again, and every time this variable I, which is referring over here, in each instance of loop it will be taken over to the next and next and next items, or whatever the iterable or iterator we are running on this loop. And within these loops we can do many things. So I'll show you. Like first let me complete this loop. So do you see it will go up to the end of this iterable, and then after the last item this loop will be over and we will be exited out from this loop. Do you see? And now we have reached on the after this on the last item, and now it went back, but we have exited out because after that there is no item in this iterable or in this list. But let me do one thing. Now let's print it out this variable I, and let me instead of printing this way, let me use this ends, and instead of printing these items in a next line, just make a change in this print function, make it so now everything will come after 1, this 2 will come with a semicolon and after a couple of spaces, and then in the end we will print whatever will be the value of the I. So let's run. So now do you see what's happened? And this is the value of this I. So even after completing this loop, this I variable did not destroy. Its value remained there, and whatever the value was the last item of this iterable, that value was assigned to this variable I, and it remained there with this 8th value in our memory. So we can utilize if there is a kind of requirement, but generally we don't do that, but just for the information that is. Now let's see that what are all the things we can do in this loop. So we can run any instruction between these loops. So let's create a let's say create two lists. Now let's say I want to create two lists. From this list, one will contain the even item, second will contain the odd item. So let's create first this even item list. So first let's make it empty. Now let's create a odd item list. Let's make it empty. And now let's copy and paste this whole loop. And now let me do one thing. Let me create one more variable. Let's say j is equal to j. Let's say 22. So now with every loop, I want to change the value of j. So let's say j is equal to j plus 2. And then now, what do I want to do? I want to put a if statement inside in this loop, and as I value will be defined in each loop, the each item of this particular iterable. So I'm gonna say if I modulo 2 is equal to 0, that means if its remainder is 0, then I will add this I even append I. Else if it is not, then I'll append this to odd append I. And now let's print j, and let's say and put it this way. Yeah, so now let's run this whole loop line by line. So first in the let me restart it first, so that let me lose all the variable whatever there was. Now let me run this particular loop. So first, after first line got executed, we have created this even list. Now we have created this odd empty list, and now we have gone inside in this loop. And in this loop, so do you see, the moment we have gone inside in this loop, now this I is referring after the first iteration of this loop to this variable 1 inside whatever is there in this iterable. And now if you'll see, now j value is 22. So when this line will be executed, now we have changed the value 22 to 24 in the memory. Now it is checking over here. Now I modulo 2. So now I value is 1. So will it give 0? No, it will not. It will give 1. I modulo 1. So because this condition will not get completed, so we exited out from this first if statement condition, and we went inside in the else condition. And now we will append this I value into this odd list, particular list. So you will see that the moment we have append this I, now we have append this value of I inside in this odd list. Now we went back in the loop. So that's what happens in the loop. So we went in this loop again we run the same lines as until we complete this whole iterable. So now whenever this line get executed, now this I value will be referred to the whatever will be the second item. So if you will see in the memory, now I is referring the second item. Now this j has become 26 from 24 because we have changed the value over here from this line. Then now again we are checking. Now I value is 2 over here. So now it will pass this condition, right? So now it went inside, and now we will append even with this the value of I. So now I value, if you see, sorry, not even value, in the even list we have added this 2. And now again we print j 26, and then we went in the loop, and then now again after this execution of this line, now I value will be 3. Now I value has changed to 3, and now again after this line j value has changed to 28, and then again we are making a check. So now it does not comply with this condition, so we came inside in the else. Now it has appended in the odd list to 3. Now we went back. So this way we will execute this whole loop, and it will go until the last item of this iterable, which is 8. So now we are, so this is the last item. Now I value has become 8. So you see it has reached up to over here. Now after this execution of this line, we will exit it out from this loop. So do you see we have exited out? This loop has ended. So that's how a loop runs, and that's how in this loop we can process many instructions. Only thing, loop process the same lines of code again and again as per the number of items in a iterable. On whatever the iterable we are running a loop, and this I variable will refer the next item in each loop. So that's the whole concept of a loop. So I hope this video has given you a bit idea about a loop, that what is a loop, and a bit idea that what we can do with a loop. So guys, now let's start about nested for loops in Python, and we will understand these nested for loops with a line by line execution. So this is our nested for loops. So this is a whole outer for loop, and in that outer for loop we have used a inner for loop. So that's what a nested for loops are. So whenever we use a one more loop inside in a loop, we call them the nested loops, and this is a nested for loop. So here I have declared a variable counter, and with every iteration of our outer for loop, we are changing the value of this particular counter variable, and then we are printing with every iteration of our outer for loop this statement, this f string, and in this f string I have used this counter variable, and then we will run our inner for loop with every iteration of our outer for loop. So let's start with the line by line execution now. So we have created this variable counter with the first line of execution, and look at very carefully this memory also, that how does memory behaves in a nested for loop. As with an understanding of a proper memory management, you will have a very good clarity about these nested for loops. So now we are going inside in our outer for loop. So with the execution of our first line, this variable I is referring to the first item of this particular list. Now we have changed the value of this counter variable from 0 to 1. Now we are printing this line, that outer for loop iteration 1, as the counter variable value was 1, so we got this one from there. Now we are going inside in a for loop, and this is the first iteration of our outer for loop. So in this first iteration of our outer for loop, this I value will remain 1. So whenever we will refer this I with our first iteration of our outer for loop, it will remain 1. Now let's execute this. So now with the first iteration of our inner loop, now this j value has become to 2. Now we are printing the value I and j, and in the memory now I value is 1, which we got from our outer loop first iteration, and j value we got 2, which we got the first iteration of our inner loop. So let's print it out. So we got 1 and 2. Now we have gone for the second iteration of our inner loop. So in a second iteration, after execution of this line, the j value will change from 2 to 4, right? Now j value has changed in the memory 2 to 4, but I value remained 1, which we got from there, and you can check that over here also. So with this line of execution, now we got this statement 1 and 4. Now let me go bit up. Now we have completed all the iteration of our inner loop. So we have exited out from our inner loop. We have gone back for the now the second iteration of our inner loop, and look at very carefully what will happen when we execute this line. Now this I value will change to the second item of this particular list. Now again we are changing the value of this counter. Now this counter has value has become 2. Now we are printed out again outer loop iteration 2. Now in the again we will run this inner loop, and in this inner loop, now with the first iteration of our inner loop, the j value has become 2, and I value in the second iteration is 3, right? So we will print what? 3 and 2, because that's what that was in the memory. Now we have gone for the second iteration of our inner loop. Now j value becomes 4, from 2 to 4. So now j value is 4, whereas I value remained 3 in a second iteration. So again we have put 3 and 4. Now we have completed all the iteration of our inner for loop. So now we have gone back for our third iteration for our outer loop. So in a third iteration, what will happen? Now this I value will become 5, right? Now I value has become 5. Again we have added counter to 1. So now counter. So again it printed out this if statement. So now I hope you have getting a full understanding. So now let me complete with a single command the whole execution. This is how it happens. So guys, now let's understand about break and continue keywords in a for loop. So here I have written a for loop, and we have already seen in the last part that how does a for loop works. And here I have used a f string. So with every iteration of our loop, now this I value will refer to this particular whatever will be the value of this I in this loop. So now let's see with a line by line execution what does our break keyword does in our for loop. So now as we did not meet this condition, we immediately exited out from this if statement, and now we print this line running for loop iteration 1. Now in the second iteration of this loop, now this I value has changed to 2. So now we printed out this before break. So that line has printed out before without any issues. But now notice down what will happen when I'm executing this particular break keyword line. So look at our execution has gone out from the for loop. So that's what this break keyword does. So whenever we will meet a break keyword in our loops, we will immediately exited out from that loop immediately. No other instruction will be executed from that loop. So now we are out of from the loop. So we printed out these lines and then new line after loop, the loop, whatever the instruction is there after that loop. So that's what this break keyword does. So whenever we will meet this break keyword, we will immediately exit it out from that specific loop. So it might be a bit tricky when we will running the nested for loops. So that part we'll understand later on. But for now, this is what it is. So whenever we will meet in a loop with a break keyword, we will immediately exit it out from that loop. Now let me restart it. Now let me clear down. Now let's understand what does a continue keyword does in a loop. So let me print it out. Now instead of break, now let me make it continue. So let's break. Now let's change this break to continue. Continue. Yeah. Now let's see the line by line execution. What happens when we meet with a continue keyword in a for loop. So let's start the line by line execution. So after first iteration, as usual, now I value is 1. So we'll immediately exit it out from that if statement, and we printed out this running for loop iteration. Then now when I value is 2, now we will meet this condition So we went inside in this if statement. Now we have printed out this before continue, but now we have meeting this particular continue keyword. And look at very carefully now what will happen when I execute this line where this continue keyword is. So do you see, the moment this line has executed, we did not go to the next line, but we went back to the loop, and now it will be to the next iteration, that will be the 3. Now just see, the I value has changed to 3. So whenever we meet this continue keyword, so whatever the iteration is running on that particular for loop, we stop that iteration and then we went back to the next loop. It does not exited out from that loop. We just stop running that particular iteration of that loop. That's what this continue keyword does. So now as usual, we will continue running our loop. So now we have printed out 3. Now again we printed out 4, and now we have completed all the iteration of this particular iterable. So now we will exit it out from the loop in a normal as usual way. Now let's say I don't want to skip 2 and as well as let's say 3 also. So again I can do the same thing. So let's write down one more. If I is equal to 3, then again make it continue and make it before that. So that, yeah, we immediately continue from that. Now let me clear the whole output. Let me restart it, all the variables. Now let me run this for loop again. So again exit it out, we running this iteration. Now we are going ahead this I. Now before continue, we print out this. Now we went back. Now I value has become 3, but now we are immediately meeting with a continue keyword. So immediately we will went back to the next iteration. Now I value will be the 4. When I value is 4, so now we will print it out this. And now we have completed our all the iteration of this loop. So we will exit it out from this loop. And so I hope this gives you a good idea what this continue keyword does in a for loop. So we will immediately exit it out from that iteration whenever we'll meet this continue keyword, not from the for loop. So guys, now let's have a understanding of break and continue keywords in a nested for loop, as they behave a bit differently in a nested for loop, yes, but with a same original concept. But before that, I hope you have a basic clarity about break and continue, what they do in a for loops. So now let's understand how does break and continue behaves in a nested for loop. So this is our nested for loop. Now let's see everything with a line by line execution, because that will give you a full clarity. So first let me restart it, and now let's me run it again, and see, this is a memory in this Python module. So look at this very carefully, because that will give you a full clarity. So with the first iteration, we have created this memory I, and now I is referring to the first item of this particular iterator or list in this case. Now we have gone inside in our inner loop, and in this if statement, this j value with the first iteration is referring to the 11, so we will not meet this condition, so we'll escape out from this if statement. So now we are printing this I and j, and value of I and j is 1 and 11. We have printed out this 1 and 11. Now we have gone back for the second iteration of our inner loop. So in the second iteration, after execution of this line, now this j value will change to 34. Again, we are not meeting this condition, so again we will skip this whole if statement. Now the I and j value is 1 and 34. So we'll print this 1 and 34. Now we have gone for the third iteration of our inner loop. Now we are meeting this condition. Now in the third iteration, j value has become 63. Now look at very carefully what will happen. So do you see what has happened? We have gone back to our outer for loop. So as this is our whole inner loop, so whenever we meet a break keyword in any inner loop, so we'll exit it out from that specific loop, not from the whole loop, only from that specific loop. So that's what happened as we made the break keyword in a third iteration of our inner loop. We exited out only from our inner loops and we went back for the next iteration of our outer for loop. So in the next iteration, now after execution of this line, now this I value will become 2. And now we in this iteration, the j value has become again 11. So again we'll escape out this if statement, and I and j value in this memory is 2 and 11. We'll print out this 2 and 11. So again we have gone back for the next iteration of our inner loop. So again this j value is 34. So we'll print it out this 2 and 34. And now again in a third iteration of our inner loop, now this j has become 63. Now we will again meet with this break keyword. So and now we know very well that whenever we'll meet with a break keyword in any inner loop, so we'll exit it out from that particular inner loop. So now in this case, this is our inner loop, so we'll not print it out this I and j. We'll only get back for the next iteration of our outer loop. So now we have gone back for the next iteration of our outer loop. Now I hope you have getting a good idea what does this break keyword does in a nested for loop. So now let me run the whole loop with a single command, and I hope you have getting now full understanding how we are getting these outputs. Now let me again restart it. Now let me clear the output. Now let's see what does this continue keyword does in a nested for loop. So now I think this so let me again run the whole code with a line by line execution. As usual with the first iteration, now this I value is 1, and now we have gone inside in our inner loop. So in a inner loop, now j value became 11. Now we are putting this condition: if I will be 2 or j will be 34, then we'll meet this continue. So now in this iteration, I value is 1 in the first iteration which got from over here, and j value is 11 which we got from over here. So we are not meeting any of these conditions, so we'll escape out this particular if statement. So we'll print it out this I and j. So we got this 1 and 11 because that's what in the memory. Now we have gone for the second iteration of our inner loop. So in a second iteration, now we'll meet with this condition. So now let's execute this line. So now j value has become 34. Now we are meeting this condition. So in a whenever we meet this or operator, so if we meet any of the condition, so we always pass this condition. So now we'll go inside in this particular if statement. If you're not getting this clarity, then please check my video about logical operators. So again, that video link also you can find in that topmost right hand side corner link. So you can find those videos over there. Now when we are going inside, so now look at very carefully what will happen now. So do you see, we did not go for the next line. We immediately exited out from that iteration, not from the loop, but only of that second iteration of our inner loop. Make sure the second iteration, again I am repeating, of our inner loop, and we have gone for the third iteration. Now when I execute this, now the j value will become 63. Now again we are not meeting any of these conditions, so we are printing this I and j. Now we have completed all the iteration of our inner loop. So now after execution of this line, we'll exit it out from our inner loop. Now we have gone back for the second iteration of our outer loop. So now what will happen? Now in this iteration, this I value has become 2. So now when I value is 2, so now with all the iteration of our inner loop, we will meet this continue keyword because I value is 2 over here. So again, we are meeting this continue keyword. So we have skipped that particular iteration. So we did not meet this particular print function. So we have gone back for the next iteration of our inner loop, which is with 34. So now again we are meeting this condition continue because we are meeting both of these conditions, but we don't not even look at this second condition because whenever we meet the first condition in a OR operator, we stop that execution and we'll pass that particular statement. And then again we have gone back for the third iteration. Again we'll meet this continue keyword, so again we will skip that particular iteration, and then again we have completed this whole all the iteration of our inner loop. We have gone back for the third iteration of our outer loop. So in the third iteration, this I value has become 3. So again we are not meeting this condition, so now we will skip this particular if statement. So now I'll print this I and j. I value is 3, j value is 11, print 3 and 11. So now in a second iteration of our inner loop, now the j value has become 34. Again we'll meet with the continue keyword, so we'll skip that particular iteration. So we have gone for the second iteration, third iteration now. So now we have skipped out this continue, this if statement. So now I'll print I and j. Now we have completed all the iteration of our inner loop. So and now we have completed all the iteration of our outer loop also. So we have completed this whole nested for loop and we have exited out. This is how this continue keyword works in a nested for loop. So I hope this gives you a really good clarity what happens with these break and continue keywords in a nested for loop. So if you have learned something new, please subscribe my channel and don't forget to leave a comment. And thanks a lot for watching this video, and please continue watching other videos also, and there will be many more videos on this channel. So thanks a lot guys. Bye bye. So guys, now let's understand about else clause in loops. So first look at that we have this particular for loop, and here we have with this for loop this else clause also with it. So they both makes a part of a same context. So the whole logic behind this else clause is that this else clause will run if a loop completes all of its iteration. That means it does not meet with any break keyword. So let's see with the line by line execution that how does that happen. So let me start my code execution with the line by line manner. So our for loop has completed our first iteration and it has printed 1, then second iteration, then third iteration. Now our for loop has completed all the iteration. Now do you see, now we have gone inside in this else block because we have completed all the iteration without any break keyword. Then we printed out this completed all iteration without break, and then we came out from the for loop and then we print after for loop. So it's really easy to understand, right? Now let's put a break keyword inside in this for loop. So let's say if I equal to 2, then it will meet with a break condition over here. Again, let me restart the code and let me clear the output. Now let's see what will happen when we have this break condition also inside in this else loop. So we completed our first iteration. Now we have gone for the second iteration, but in the second iteration we are passing this if condition and we are meeting this break keyword. So now look at very carefully now what will happen. So do you see, we not only exited out for loop but also with its else clause also we immediately exited out whole of this context, and then we print after for loop. So this is what the whole logic about this else clause with loops and same will happen in a while loop also. So if you look at right now, let me restart it, let me clear the output. So for now, and again let me run the code line by line. Again over here we are not meeting any break clause in this while loop, so we will run this else clause, right? But again, if there will be a break inside in this, so let's say if x equal to 2, then it will be exited out from the, so let's say me print it out, let's say print out of loop. Now let me run the code line by line again. 0, 1, and now we have met this break keyword. The moment we have met this break keyword, we exited out this while loop, and with it with this else clause also, then print out of loop. So I hope this gives you pretty good clarity that what does this else clause do in a loop. So thanks guys, and I hope you have learned something new. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and continue watching the different videos. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.